Hey, leaders, welcome back to our series on being an effective leader, being aware of the effect that you have, who you're being. And we want to talk about probably the problem we hear most often, like in our survey processes with organizations and clients. The thing that comes up most often is that there's poor communication or not enough communication, or communication is a problem. And there could be lots of solutions to this, but there's one that is not so obvious. Brad, what is it?
Well, first of all, communication we find usually is a code word for relationships. It's I don't feel safe, I don't feel listened to, I don't feel respected, those kinds of things. And the least obvious candidate in this is our tendency to listen. You know, there's lots of communication out there. There's lots of talk, there's lots of meetings, there's lots of emails, there's lots of stuff coming at us. But how effective are we at listening to people, especially when they don't agree with us?
Yeah, and so specifically, we suggest that, when you're listening, just notice that you have an opinion. Just notice it in the first place. A lot of people like to keep a notepad next to them and just jot down when they notice their opinion in their head. And we're not saying you need to do anything with it. In fact, just notice it. You don't need to change it. Just set it aside for a second. And don't try to convince yourself or other people that you're right, by the way. Just set it aside and try on what is being said. Literally listen as if like, well, that's interesting. I don't think that way. That's not the perspective that I have, but let me just try it on for a second. And maybe I'll ask a few questions to get curious and to follow up with that. So that's the first thing you can do. That's really powerful is notice you have an opinion and set it aside and listen to the person more deeply. The second is to listen for coaching. And what we mean by that is that anything anybody says, doesn't matter their tone or tenor or their affect, anything, even with some explicit words in it, can be taken as coaching if you listen to it that way. Someone can say something that's quite mean, frankly, but if you slow down and think about, well, that's interesting. What were they trying to communicate? And maybe there's some coaching in there for me. Now, again, this is not easy to do, but anything can be received as coaching because coaching really happens in how we listen to each other, especially. And so as a leader, leading by example, these will shape your culture. And our guess is that if you really work on listening to your people, you'll start to notice that the complaints about communication will start to diminish and start to dissipate.
Yeah, it can be as simple as being open and listening, but it's as difficult as listening well and trying on what people are saying, not to defend or correct or think inside our heads about what we want to say, but just learning to understand. And that simple but difficult to practice consistently concept can make all the difference.